Hello, everyone. My name is Patrik Jonell.
And my name is Kucherenko, and this is joint work here at KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, entitled Can We Trust Online Crowdworkers? Comparing online and offline participants in a preference test of virtual agents. This research was frustration-driven, because in the previous studies we conducted evaluating virtual agents using online crowdworkers, we were quite frustrating by the level of attentiveness of those online crowdworkers, and we wanted to investigate it and to understand it better. And to give some context, I'm going to play a video from one of our latest studies.
And you can actually completely define yourself independently of that, versus the idea of somebody saying, no, every little...
Which of the models did you prefer? The one on the left or the one on the right? Well, it was probably not so easy to say, especially if you haven't seen any of them, as some of you probably did. It's quite normal these days to do several things at the same time when being online. And many of us do have several screens and do several things at a time, and this is normal. And so we can assume that online participants also could do several things at a time. But then, how much do we know about their attentiveness? That's exactly the question we asked in this research. Do online workers actually perform the same as offline workers in perceptual studies? And this question came out because it's quite common to use online workers in perceptual studies with virtual agents, especially with those involving gesture generation. Most of them use online workers. And many of them also use attention checks to filter inattentive participants, resulting in discarding big part of the study participants, which puts in question how reliable are those participants at all. And we are not the first one asking this kind of question. There has been quite some research on that, especially focused on text-based questionnaire research. And here we're going to list just a few of them. Hauser and Schwartz have found in their study that participants on Amazon Mechanical Turk, often called MTurk or AMT, have actually performed better in their questionnaire study. Jermin and colleagues have found very similar results for online and offline participants in terms of cognitive tests. Guin et al. Have done a test which is the most close to our experiments, where they ask participants to rate audio recordings. And they have found, again, very similar results for online and offline participants. But does this finding hold for audio-visual perceptual tests? We are not sure, as we could not find such a study in literature. And that's exactly the study we have done.
So in order to do this, we set up a study where we wanted to see if there's a difference in results obtained from online and offline workers in an audiovisual perception task. We also wanted to investigate if there's a difference in passing attention checks. We did this using an already validated study that we had been running before. One thing we also thought was important was to have the same reimbursement level for both the online and the offline participants. Some previous work have only given the offline participants university credits, for example. So in order to do this, we set up 3 hypotheses. The first one being preference for the 2 models will be significantly different between the results obtained in lab and the results obtained from Prolific and Amazon Mechanical Turk. These 2 being commonly used crowdsourcing platforms that people have been using for, amongst other, evaluation purposes. Our second hypothesis, in-lab participants will pass more attention checks during the experiment than online participants. And our third hypothesis is that the inter/intra-rater agreement, estimated using inter/intra-class correlation coefficient, ICC, will be significantly higher in the results obtained in lab than the results obtained from online workers. I would like to point out that we also did the pre-registration using OSF, and this is something we encourage everybody to do. So, the study design. We have the independent variables, the things that we manipulated, and the dependent variables, the things that we measured. Among the independent variables, we had the participant pool. We looked at InLab, Amazon Mechanical Turk, and Prolific. We had two different gesture generation models. One which took text and speech as input and generated motion, and the other one took speech only as input and generated motion. For the dependent variables, we had a preference score. So we looked at the model preference, that is the gesture generation model, which one the participant preferred. And we also looked at the inter and intra-rater agreement, that is how coherent is the participant within themselves, but also within their group. Furthermore, we also looked at attention checks. We had two different attention checks. We had audio-video attention checks, where we had a message either said by a synthesized voice or displayed in text that instructed the user to report this video as broken. I will show that a little bit later. We also had the same video attention checks, where we basically showed the exact same two videos to the participant and expected them to say that there's no difference between them. This is how the evaluation interface looked like. We had two videos, which could be played independently, and then we asked the participants which of the two videos they preferred. They could either choose the left video, right video, or there was no difference between the videos. Here they also can report an issue with the video, which was also used for the attention checks, which I will show next. So I will now play the two different attention checks.
The concepts or the objects that are behind the words, and they just think that they're the same thing. And so that's why I think so many people get trapped. Clearly, like, so stupid, but like in his.
Please report this as broken audio.
Like checking for clothes, and he was just like.
So as you saw, the beginning and the end of these videos looked like the normal videos. However, in the middle, we inserted the message. And we expected the user to then report the videos as broken as part of our attention checks. As you can see, we recruited 24 participants in each participant pool. That is Amazon Mechanical Turk, InLab, and Prolific. We started running this study in lab. And then we wanted to recruit participants online, which matched some of the key demographic characteristics from our InLab study. Unfortunately, Amazon Mechanical Turk does not provide good tools for getting participants matching a certain demographic. However, Prolific does that. So we're able to get participants with similar age, gender, education level, and if they're currently being students. So, the results. As you can see here, the participants overwhelmingly preferred the no PCA model, that is, when text and audio was fed as input to the model. This is consistent with our previous findings, where we saw the same thing. However, there was no statistical difference between the three participant pools in this regard. They preferred that model with about 80% in all three cases. This lets us reject our first hypothesis. We also looked at the audio-video attention checks. So in our previous study, which had a fairly similar design, most of the participants did not pass the attention checks. In this study, however, most participants did pass the audio-video attention checks. So this brings the question, why? Well, we had some thoughts about that. One thing is that the reimbursement level was much higher in this current study than in the previous study. Another one was that we used a bonus payment system. Since we wanted to pay all the participants for their participation, even if they cheated, which we actually wanted to see if they did or not. So we always wanted to pay the participants. So we gave them 1/3 of the payment for just participating in the study. Then if they successfully finished the study, that is, they didn't fail too many audio-video attention checks, we would give them 2/3 rest of the money. Another thing that was different from this study to the other one was that attention checks were slightly clearer in this study. However, looking at the same video attention checks, on the other hand, where the two videos were the exact same, 44% of the participants failed either one or both of the same video attention checks. However, there was no significant difference between the participant pools. This lets us reject the second hypothesis as well. Looking at the inter and intra-rater agreement, that is how coherent the participants are with themselves or within the participant pool, we again see that there is no statistical difference between the different participant pools, which lets us reject the third hypothesis. We also did some exploratory analysis, for example, the task duration and comment length, but that is covered in the paper and will not be covered in this presentation.
Let's talk about limitations. First of all, there was no ground truth in our comparison. There was no correct answer to the preference test, since both the in-lab participants and online workers could be wrong. And to overcome that in the future work, we are going to examine experts in gesture analysis and use their rating as a ground truth. Second limitation is that while online participants received bonus payment, as Patrik explained, for the participants who came in lab, the situation was different. We could not pay them cash because of the university restrictions, and hence we gave them a movie ticket. And so they were in slightly different conditions. The final limitation is the reimbursement level, because the amount of money we pay online participants were quite high in order to match the price of the movie ticket. And it was much higher than what they normally get. And this could be a confound in our results. This could be a reason why, in fact, they were more attentive. And this is something we are actually investigating at the moment. To sum up, what did we learn? We found no significant difference in several measures between the participant pools, and this leads us to a conclusion that online workers could be successfully used instead of inline participants for audiovisual perceptual experiments, which is great news given the situation today. But we strongly advise to pay participants fair, because this could be a factor that influences their attention. Before we end, we would like to thank to all the authors of this work. Apart from me and Patrik, it was also Ilaria Torre and Jonas Beskow. And now we are ready to take your questions.